Hello and welcome back to another episode of Nick Tiffany's Movie Reviews, coming at you online and in print format at nicktiffany.com, in audio format wherever you get your podcasts, and even in video on YouTube. Today we are talking about one of the greatest films to start the year off with, I would say. A24 is wasting no time getting into the movie game. They've got Civil War coming out next month, but today we are talking about Love Lies Bleeding by director and writer Rose Glass. This is, takes place in the late 80s out in New Mexico. It is kind of a thriller slash pseudo lesbian love story, I would say. Kristen Stewart plays the main character, Lou. She kind of looks after her father's gym. Again, they're somewhere out in the desert in New Mexico. Not much is going on in her town, in her life. You get this sense that she doesn't really enjoy where she's at, but, we kind of learn early on she sticks around because her sister Beth, played by Jenna Malone, her sister's nearby. She's got kids, and her sister is just consistently showing up with bruises, bloodied lips, black eyes, cuts on her nose, things like that. And so, there's a great suspicion that her husband, JJ, played by Dave Franco, is the one beating her, causing all this abuse. And so, just right from the get-go, you feel this rage that Stewart's character just is kind of building up the more and more she sees her sister put in these harmful positions. And so one fine day, Katie O'Brien, who's playing the role of Jackie in the film, strolls into town looking just, completely jacked, to be honest. I mean, she is incredibly ripped, incredibly muscular in a way, though, that is just, fascinating to see. Really impressive. So Jackie comes into town. She's headed to Las Vegas from Oklahoma. She's going to be going to a bodybuilding competition. So she's just kind of coming through town, looking for a place to stay, looking for a place to lift. So in almost kind of like a Rocky similar montage, she's out by the freeway doing pull-ups on the overpass, getting a workout in wherever she can, because clearly this is something that she is really into. And you can kind of see early on in the film how a lot of people kind of respond to her physique, whether it's judgment from other women. Obviously, guys might be into it more of the bodybuilding type, but you also see kind of how she's got a pretty no shit taking attitude, I would say, as far as people making advances on her and touching her. And I know, there's so many times where I'm like, I know this is just a movie. I know this person didn't actually get hit in the face, or I know that this was not what it ends up looking like on screen. But she delivers a blow to this guy's face who's, she's massive in the movie. And, and I really truly say massive, and just like head to toe, muscles are popping, greatest physique of her life. Could be Batwoman, could be anybody. I mean, just any kick ass, could be Wonder Woman. I mean, it's impressive. So she decks this guy in the face, and he comes back, and this is a muscle bound bodybuilding guy. He comes back and decks her in the face. And it's one of those moments where, you're like, oh, fuck. Like, I just, pardon my swearing. This will be an explicit review. But I mean, there's just so many moments in this film where you're like, oh my God, I hope she's okay. But she takes it like a champ, and it just I feel like it sets a tone early on, the kind of attitude she has and how willing she is to stand up against people and stand up for what's right. So naturally, Jackie and Lou meet. They Lou's definitely admiring Jackie from afar, much like the audience is kind of doing. And I just got to say, the way that Rose Glass, the director, the way she frames a lot of these workouts, these montages, how Lou sees her, it's never done in a gratuitous way, but it always feels like, I don't think complimentative is necessarily the right word, but to throw it back to my guy, Zack Snyder, since 300, through Wonder Woman, through Zack Snyder's Justice League, the way he portrays muscular men and women and physique is something that I think he's always done well. That just more than anything, you're just really impressed by these people and what they've able to, what they're able to accomplish with their bodies, but how godlike sometimes they can look, because you think of these chiseled statues, and just different paintings and structures, and so whether it was Greek gods, or otherwise, there's just something about how that look can be presented. And even though this is also, that Lou kind of has this lustful eye towards her as well, but even then, moments that they share, whether it's intimacy, whether it's sex, whether it's kissing, whatever, all of it is done, I think, very tastefully, in the sense that, it really takes a look at the bigger picture around them too. You look at the time, you look at the setting, you think about, the fact that, this definitely was not as common, and people are going to have comments to make, people are going to give them dirty looks, people are going to give them weird looks, guys are going to say some horrible shit to them if they decline to go on a date with them, just any number of things. I think the film really handles it all really well, and kind of has it through this lens of what Lou sees, how she feels, the world around her. And you also really get that from Jackie too. And so, without going too much more into detail, the two girls think it's going to be a good idea maybe to get Jackie a little juiced before the competition too. So she starts taking, which, I can only imagine are steroids or some form of some growth hormones or something like that, because this is where the film gets a little A24 in that sense of genre filmmaking. Um, Progressively throughout the film, as Jackie's taking more of these injections, there's just countless where you're watching and you're kind of like, oh, wow, she's just like needle in the butt, needle in the thigh, needle in the foot, wherever. And you're just, oh, I don't know. Needles for me are kind of, I can watch some stuff and I would watch that and I was fine, but it's just, you're like, oh, this is kind of uncomfortable to watch. Like, oh God, like, why do you have to inject yourself between your toes? Like, just not fun. But as Jackie progressively gets stronger and feels the influence of all these drugs, you see her body kind of morphing, or you see veins starting to pop out of her arms and her back and around her neck, and you're visibly seeing her muscles kind of expanding and hearing this kind of like bodily sound as they're growing. It was kind of funky. And it was definitely something more so where I'm like, okay, I know that's not really what happens, or it doesn't happen immediately like that, or it doesn't quite work just like that. But I think for the story they're telling, there's definitely kind of an atmospheric vibe the whole time. Ominous music throughout. They kind of play around with red and black photography, or almost like a red light room looking feel to certain scenes as well, that you can kind of tell or maybe either, it's like a bad dream, it's a nightmare, it's their sort of vision of what they're experiencing right now. And so, like, 99% of that works really well in the movie. And just without spoiling anything, all I would say is the ending of this movie, while it doesn't ruin how much I enjoyed it, it doesn't ruin the movie for me. I didn't come out of it like, oh, I can't recommend that movie to people anymore, because I was just frustrated how it ended. It felt like they waited to do the obligatory A24, like, just wild, random, nonsensical scene. And it wasn't necessarily nonsensical, but they save it for the end. And all I would say is, if you watch it, for me, it just felt like things got either really inflated towards the end, or they were just blown out of proportion in a way that was like, there's a realm of believability with everything we've already got going on and what we've seen. And then there's like, nah, you just took this past, like, you could have stuck a really interesting landing there, but I think they just took it a little too far. And I know the directors kind of said, it's supposed to be ambiguous. It's not supposed to be meant taken literally, which I get it. I think anyone who watches the film, you can kind of tell what is literal and happening and what is kind of this foggy, hazy, dreamlike sense of like, is this real? Is this something happening? Or is this just kind of like an interesting stand-in for what the character's actually feeling? Because there's definitely some art housey type stuff going on here. A very neo-noir type feel to it as well, where there is this kind of larger mystery going on behind the scenes. that, again, I don't totally want to speak to, because I went into this movie really only knowing that it was going to be something around bodybuilding and weightlifting. I didn't know more than that, and I assumed maybe that these women might fall for one another, but how the film also approaches love and, what you would do for the person you love, and how in some ways when you haven't had a great love, or a love that feels receptive, your judgment or your view of it can be very different in how you handle certain situations. And so I thought, Katie O'Brien and Kristen Stewart, it just work beautifully together. Whether it's their, more vulnerable interactions that they have, or some of their more hardened moments where they're really having to bring more than just the physicality into the role. Whether it's kind of talking about their pasts, whether it's about arguments in their present, they just really, they play off of one another really well. They share glances in a way that just sells so much more than words could at times. The music in the film is really great. Continually kind of keeps you on edge. It's that feeling of like, all right, maybe things are going a little bit too well right now, or there's just, you could tell something's just waiting over the horizon. You're not sure what, but I really dug this film. This was a really interesting movie that just continued to build on some of my suspicions that kind of happened earlier in the movie. It's one that kind of lays out a few pieces for you early on. And you're kind of wondering, like, all right, are we going to get back to that, or when does that kind of get into the fold here now? So I was very impressed. This was, more than I expected it to be, for sure. Again, I don't know what I expected going in, but I came out feeling really great about it. Save for that little bit of an exaggerated ending, I thought this is just another great way to start the year. We've had Dune on one hand, which is your mega blockbuster. Glad that we've had something already that is so monumental in that sense, that it's like, wow, beginning of the year, love that we have something so good from that genre. It's glad that, I'm glad we didn't have to wait till May or the start of summer movie season to get a decent blockbuster. And in the same sense, it's nice that before April, we've got, I'd say there's at least been a few pretty good films I've seen this year that have come out, but this would definitely be, not equal to Dune necessarily. Two totally different movies, two totally different budgets, sizes, stories, everything. But it's Love Lies Bleeding is fantastic. This is a really great film. If it's playing in your area nearby, definitely check it out. Don't be like the guy who got caught at the movie theater trying to have too much fun watching this movie with a pack of cigarettes and fireball pints, and just no good. No good. You probably saw it on Twitter or the news if you've seen anything about this movie. And of course, A24 is just completely dug into it, and they're rolling with it. But no, great movie. Definitely check it out. This is the kind of filmmaking that definitely keeps me excited for what A24 continues to see in their different artists. And so I will take many more of these films for sure. Thank you again for listening. As always, you can find NT Movie Reviews on all social media networks, podcast platforms, YouTube, TikTok, Reels, Shorts, wherever you get your social media, you can find us there. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time.